The rain was falling against the window of the conference room. A steady, rhythmic drumming that seemed to measure out the seconds of my life as they slipped away, one by one, into the hands of people who had never earned them. I sat there, my hands folded neatly on the polished mahogany table, watching the water distort the view of the city outside, while my father's attorney read the words that would dismantle everything I had built, everything I had protected, and everything I had believed about loyalty. My name is Zara, and I am 42 years old. I have spent the better part of 2 decades managing logistics, supply chains, and the intricate web of liabilities that keep a corporation breathing. Yet in that room, surrounded by the scent of old leather and expensive cologne, I was being treated like a child who had forgotten her manners. My sister, Alina, sat across from me. She was wearing cream-colored silk, something soft and impractical, something that signaled she had nowhere to go that required dirt under her fingernails. She held her husband's hand, Marcus, who was looking at his phone, barely concealing a smirk. They thought they had won. They thought the game was over before it had truly begun. They thought I was the one who had lost. The attorney, a man named Sterling who had known our family since before I was born, cleared his throat. He didn't look at me. He looked at Alina. He always looked at Alina. She was the golden child, the one who stayed close to home, the one who managed the social calendar, the one who made sure our parents looked good in the community newsletters. I was the one who managed the factory. I was the one who dealt with the unions, the shipping containers, the regulatory compliance, the late-night calls when a truck went off the road in Nebraska. I was the one who kept the money coming in, while she was the one who spent it. But none of that mattered in the eyes of the trust. The trust was designed to protect the family legacy, or so my father had told me on his deathbed, his hand cold in mine, his breath rattling in a chest that had given out after years of smoking and stress. He had told me he loved me. He had told me I was strong. And then he had signed a document that gave Alina the liquid assets, the investment portfolio, the vacation home in the Hamptons, and the primary residence in Connecticut. He gave me the business. He gave me Vance Logistics. On paper, Vance Logistics was a liability. That was the narrative they had constructed over the last 5 years, a slow erosion of truth that had started with whispers at family dinners and ended with formal audits that conveniently highlighted losses while ignoring revenue streams. The business was drowning in debt, or so the report said. It was facing lawsuits from environmental agencies. It was hemorrhaging capital. My father had been convinced, or perhaps he had allowed himself to be convinced, that the company was a sinking ship. By leaving it to me, he thought he was sparing Alina the burden. He thought he was giving me a challenge, a final test of my worthiness. But I knew what he was doing. He was isolating me. He was ensuring that when the company finally collapsed, as everyone expected it to, I would go down with it, bankrupt and disgraced, while Alina sat safe on her trust fund, protected from the fallout. It was a mercy killing, disguised as an inheritance. They expected me to fail. They expected me to come crawling to them within a year, asking for a loan, asking for a job, asking for mercy. I looked at Alina as Sterling finished reading the clauses. She didn't look triumphant. She looked relieved. That was worse. Triumph implies effort. Relief implies that the obstacle has been removed without her having to lift a finger. I was the obstacle. I was the liability. And now I was the owner of a failure. I stood up when the reading was concluded. I did not shake hands. I did not offer condolences. I simply gathered the folder containing the preliminary financial statements they had handed me, the ones that showed red ink on every page, and I walked out of the room. The rain was heavier now. I walked to my car, a sedan that was 5 years old and paid off, and I sat in the driver's seat for a long time before I started the engine. I did not cry. Crying is a reaction to loss, and I had not yet determined what I had lost. I had been given a company. Regardless of its financial health, it was an asset. It had buildings, it had trucks, it had contracts, it had employees, and it had me. I started the car and drove to the office. Not the family home, not the lawyer's office, but the actual headquarters of Vance Logistics, a brick building in Newark that smelled of diesel and coffee and paper dust. This was my territory. This was where the real work happened. The family home was a museum. The lawyer's office was a theater. This place was the engine. I walked through the lobby. The security guard, a man named George who had worked there for 30 years, nodded at me. He knew me. He knew that I was the one who signed the checks that paid his pension contributions. He knew that Alina had never set foot in this building except for the Christmas party, and even then, she had stayed in the conference room. I went to my office, the one my father had used, and I closed the door. I locked it. I sat down at the desk and I opened the folder. I looked at the numbers. They were bad, really bad. The debt-to-equity ratio was catastrophic. There were liens on the fleet. There were pending judgments from a spill in Ohio 3 years ago. There were payroll discrepancies. It looked like a disaster. It looked like exactly what they wanted it to look like. But I have spent 20 years in operations. I know what a real disaster looks like. I know what a managed decline looks like. And I know what fraud looks like. This wasn't just mismanagement. This was surgery. Someone had gone in and removed the organs while leaving the body looking intact enough to bury. I spent the first week simply observing. I did not make any changes. I did not send any memos. I walked the floor. I talked to the warehouse managers. I talked to the dispatchers. I talked to the accountants. I asked questions that seemed casual, questions about workflow, about vendors, about why certain shipments were being routed through specific third-party brokers. I listened. I learned that the third-party brokers were all owned by a holding company called Meridian Solutions. I learned that Meridian Solutions had been hired 2 years ago to streamline logistics. I learned that the fees Meridian charged were 40% higher than the market rate. I learned that no one knew who owned Meridian Solutions because the paperwork was filed in Delaware, and the registered agent was a law firm that specialized in anonymity. But I didn't know for sure, but I suspected. Marcus, Alina's husband, was a consultant. He specialized in efficiency. He had been advising my father on cost-cutting measures for the last 3 years. He was the one who had recommended the audit that declared the business failing. He was the one who had suggested the restructuring that funneled money out of Vance and into these opaque vendors. I went home that night and I made a pot of coffee. I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and I began to draw lines. I connected the dots. My father's decline in health had coincided with the rise of Meridian Solutions. The liquidity crisis that justified the trust structure had been manufactured by inflating expenses and siphoning profits. They hadn't just wanted me to have the business, they wanted me to have the debt. They wanted the business to be a shell, empty of value, while the value had been transferred to entities they controlled. Alina got the cash portfolio, which was safe and liquid. I got the liability, but they had made a mistake. They had been too greedy. They had left trails. In the world of logistics, everything leaves a trail. Bills of lading, shipping manifests, fuel receipts, driver logs. You cannot move a truck without creating data. You cannot move money without creating a record. They thought because I was operational, I wasn't forensic. They thought I was a manager, not an investigator. They underestimated the kind of patience it takes to run a supply chain. You do not rush a shipment. You do not guess at weights. You verify, you check, you confirm. I applied the same logic to my inheritance. I hired a lawyer, not the family lawyer, not Sterling. I hired a woman named Sarah Jenkins, who specialized in corporate fraud and forensic accounting. She was sharp, quiet, and expensive. I paid her out of my personal savings, not the business accounts. I did not want them to know I was digging. I told her I wanted a full audit, but not the kind that gets filed with the state. I wanted a shadow audit. I wanted to know where every dollar had gone for the last 5 years. I gave her access to the servers. I gave her the keys to the file rooms. I told her to look for Meridian. I told her to look for Marcus. I told her to look for anything that didn't fit the profile of a legitimate business expense. She started working. I went back to running the company. I had to. If I stopped working, if I let the operations slip, they would have ammunition. They would say I was incompetent. They would say the business was failing because of me, not because of what had been done to it before I took the helm. So I worked harder than I had ever worked. I negotiated with the creditors. I restructured the debt payments. I sold off the old fleet and leased newer, more efficient trucks. I cut the contracts with the inefficient brokers, all except Meridian. I kept Meridian. I needed them to keep billing us. I needed the paper trail to grow. Months passed. The seasons changed. The leaves turned brown and fell off the trees outside the warehouse windows. Alina called me occasionally. She called to check in, she said. She called to see how I was holding up. Her voice was filled with a pity that felt like grease on my skin. She asked if I needed help. She asked if I wanted to consider selling the property to developers. She mentioned that the market was soft. She mentioned that she had heard from friends that the logistics industry was dying. She was testing me. She was waiting for me to crack. She was waiting for me to admit that I couldn't do it, that I needed her to step in, that I needed her to take control. I told her I was fine. I told her we were turning a corner. I told her I had some new contracts in the pipeline. I lied. I wasn't turning a corner. I was stabilizing. I was keeping the heart beating while Sarah Jenkins performed the autopsy on the rest of the body. I needed the business to be solvent enough to stand on its own when the truth came out. I needed to be the savior, not the victim. Sarah called me on a Tuesday in March. She asked me to come to her office. She didn't say anything over the phone. When I arrived, she had a box on her table. It was a standard banker's box, filled with files. She sat down and she looked at me. She didn't smile. This wasn't good news. This was evidence. She told me what she had found. Meridian Solutions was not a logistics company. It was a shell. It had no employees. It had no assets. It had no office. It was a mailbox in Wilmington. The money we paid to Meridian was being transferred immediately to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. From there, it was being funneled into a trust. She pulled out a document. It was the trust agreement. The beneficiaries of the trust were Alina and Marcus. The founder of the trust was a company registered in Nevada. The signatory on the Nevada company was Marcus, but there was more. She found emails. She had recovered deleted emails from my father's old server. They showed conversations between Marcus and the CFO, who had conveniently retired 6 months before my father died. They discussed the inflation of costs. They discussed the creation of the Meridian entity. They discussed the timing of the audit. They discussed ensuring that the valuation of Vance Logistics was low enough to justify leaving it to me without triggering a contest from Alina. They had planned it. They had sat in the city in these offices, and they had calculated the exact value of my ruin. I looked at the emails. I read them twice. I did not feel anger. Anger is hot. Anger is impulsive. Anger makes mistakes. I felt cold. I felt a clarity that was almost surgical. They had treated me like a variable in their equation. They had assumed I would react emotionally. They had assumed I would fight them in the family court, in the probate court, where things are messy and subjective. They had assumed I would try to prove I was unloved. But I wasn't going to prove I was unloved. I was going to prove they were thieves. I asked Sarah if the evidence was admissible. She said it was. She said we had enough to file a civil suit for fraud, embezzlement, and breach of fiduciary duty. She said we could pierce the corporate veil. She said we could go after the personal assets. She said we could undo the trust distribution. I asked her how long it would take. She said a year, maybe 2. Litigation is slow. Litigation is expensive. Litigation is public. I told her I didn't want litigation. Not yet. I wanted leverage. I wanted them to come to me. I wanted them to realize that the ground beneath them was not solid. I went back to the office. I sat in my father's chair. I looked at the view of the highway. Trucks were moving back and forth, carrying goods that people needed, things that kept the world turning. This business was real. The money they had stolen was real. But the power they thought they had was an illusion. It was based on the assumption that I would not fight. It was based on the assumption that I valued their approval more than my own justice. They were wrong. I valued order. I valued truth. I valued the integrity of the work. They had corrupted the work. They had turned a legacy of industry into a vehicle for greed. I would not let that stand. I began to formulate a plan. It was not a plan of destruction. It was a plan of reclamation. I would not burn the house down. I would simply change the locks. I would take back what was mine, and I would take what they had stolen, and I would use the law to make it happen. I needed to be patient. I needed to wait for the right moment. The moment when they felt safest. The moment when they thought the transaction was complete. Summer came. The heat in Newark was oppressive, rising off the asphalt in shimmering waves. I continued to run the business. I improved the margins. I cut the waste. I negotiated better rates with the fuel suppliers. I started to show a profit. Not a huge profit, but a steady one. I sent the financial reports to the family office, as required by the trust. I sent them to Alina. I made sure she saw them. I made sure she saw that the business was not dying. I made sure she saw that I was capable. I wanted her to feel the uncertainty. I wanted her to wonder if she had made a mistake. I wanted her to look at her husband and ask questions, but Marcus was confident. He was arrogant. He believed in his own cleverness. He believed that the offshore accounts were invisible. He believed that the emails were gone. He believed that I was too busy keeping the trucks running to notice the money disappearing. He didn't understand that I was the one who had built the system he was exploiting. I knew where the weak points were. I knew where the backups were stored. I knew that the cloud server had a version history that he hadn't thought to wipe. I knew that the CFO had kept a personal diary of sorts, a digital log of his transactions, because he was afraid of being double-crossed by Marcus. Fear makes people careless. Greed makes people blind. I had both on my side. In September, I made my move. It started with a letter, not a lawsuit, a letter. I had Sarah draft it. It was addressed to Alina. It was marked confidential and privileged. It outlined the findings of the internal audit. It did not accuse. It stated facts. It stated that discrepancies had been found. It stated that further investigation was warranted. It stated that if irregularities were confirmed, the trust provisions regarding fiduciary misconduct would be triggered. There was a clause in my father's trust. I had read it 100 times. It was a standard clause designed to protect the assets from mismanagement. It stated that if any beneficiary was found to have acted to the detriment of the estate, their share could be forfeit. It was a poison pill. They had forgotten about it. They had focused on the asset distribution and ignored the conduct clauses. They thought the distribution was final. It wasn't. It was contingent on good faith. I was reminding them of the terms they had signed. I sent the letter via certified mail. I waited. 3 days passed, then a week. Then Alina called. She was angry. She said I was trying to stir up trouble. She said I was bitter. She said I was trying to take what was hers. I listened. I let her speak. I let her exhaust herself. When she stopped, I spoke. I told her I wasn't trying to take anything. I told her I was trying to protect the family name. I told her that if the authorities found out about the embezzlement before we addressed it internally, it would be a scandal. I told her I wanted to avoid that. I told her I wanted to resolve this quietly. I told her I was willing to restructure the inheritance. I told her that if she returned the ill-gotten gains, if she transferred the assets acquired through fraud back to the estate, I would not pursue criminal charges. I gave her a choice. She could lose everything publicly, or she could lose everything privately. I did not raise my voice. I did not threaten. I simply presented the options. I sounded like a business partner proposing a merger. I sounded like someone who had already won and was just negotiating the terms of the surrender. She hung up. I knew what would happen next. She would talk to Marcus. They would argue. They would try to find a way out. They would call their lawyers. Their lawyers would tell them that the evidence I hinted at was dangerous. Their lawyers would tell them that if I had enough to send a letter like that, I had enough to file a complaint. They would realize that I wasn't bluffing. They would realize that I had the records. They would realize that I had the time. I had all the time in the world. They had a lifestyle to maintain. They had mortgages. They had social standing. They had children in private schools. They had more to lose than I did. I had nothing but the work. I was willing to lose it all to see them pay. They were not. 2 weeks later, Marcus called. He wanted to meet. He wanted to meet at a neutral location. A coffee shop in the city. I agreed. I went alone. I wore a suit, dark blue, sharp. I arrived 10 minutes early. I sat in the back. I watched the door. When he walked in, he looked tired. The confidence was gone. The smirk was gone. He looked like a man who had not slept. He sat down. He ordered a coffee. He didn't drink it. He looked at me. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want what belongs to the company." He said, "You got the company." I said, "I got the shell. You took the meat." He leaned forward. He said, "You can't prove anything." I said, "I don't need to prove it to you. I need to prove it to a judge. And I have the logs, I have the emails, I have the bank transfers. I have the CFO's testimony. He's willing to talk. He's angry that you didn't pay him what you promised." That was a lie. The CFO was dead. He had passed away 6 months prior, but Marcus didn't know that I knew that. Or maybe he did, but he couldn't be sure. Uncertainty is a weapon. I watched his eyes. I saw the calculation. He was weighing the risk. He was weighing the cost of fighting me versus the cost of settling. He said, "If we give it back, what happens to Alina?" I said, "Alina keeps the home. She keeps the personal effects. But the liquid assets, the portfolio, the vacation home, those go back to the estate. And the estate is the company, which means I control them." He said, "That leaves her with nothing." I said, "She has the home. She has the memory of who she thought she was. That should be enough." He said, "You're being cruel." I said, "I'm being precise. You stole from a dead man. You stole from me. You stole from the employees whose pensions you jeopardized. Cruelty is what you did. This is correction." He stood up. He said he needed to talk to her. I said, "You have 48 hours. After that, I file?" I stood up. I left the coffee on the table. I walked out into the street. The air was cool. The city was loud. I felt nothing. I felt only the satisfaction of an equation balancing. They didn't answer in 48 hours. They waited until the last minute of the third day. Sarah called me. She said they had agreed to the terms. They would sign the transfer documents. They would resign from the boards of the shell companies. They would cooperate with the tax authorities to amend the filings. They would disappear. I told her to prepare the paperwork. I told her to make it ironclad. I told her there would be no loopholes. I told her I wanted every penny. I wanted the interest. I wanted the legal fees. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had done. I wanted them to know that every dollar they spent from now on was money they had to earn, not money they had stolen. The signing took place in Sterling's office. The same room where the will had been read, the same table, but the dynamic had shifted. Alina was there. She looked smaller. She was wearing jeans and a sweater. No silk, no jewels. She looked like a woman who had been woken up from a dream. Marcus sat beside her. He didn't look at me. He looked at the papers. Sterling looked nervous. He knew what was happening. He knew he had been on the wrong side of the history. He watched as Alina signed. Her hand shook. She signed her name over the investment portfolio. She signed over the deed to the Hamptons house. She signed over the rights to the trusts. She signed away the safety net. When she was done, she looked at me. She said, "I hope you're happy." I looked at her. I said, "Happiness isn't the point. Integrity is." I signed the acceptance documents. I took the folder. I stood up. I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew what was behind me. I knew the silence that was settling over them. The silence of people who realize they are alone. The process of transferring the assets took 3 months. It was bureaucratic. It was tedious. It involved banks, tax agencies, title companies. I handled it all. I didn't delegate. I wanted to see every signature. I wanted to verify every transfer. I wanted to feel the weight of the pen in my hand. When it was done, the business was solvent. The debt was paid. The offshore accounts were closed. The money was back in the corporate account. I reinvested it. I upgraded the facility. I increased the wages for the workers. I established a scholarship fund for the employees' children. I did it in my father's name. Not because I forgave him, but because the name belonged to the work, not to the man. The man had failed. The work remained. Alina and Marcus moved out of the family home. They couldn't afford the taxes. They couldn't afford the upkeep. They downsized to a condo in Jersey. I heard about it through the grapevine. I heard that Marcus was working as a sales rep. I heard that Alina was teaching yoga. I didn't verify it. I didn't care. Their lives were no longer my concern. My concern was the fleet. My concern was the supply chain. My concern was the future. I had restored order. I had taken the chaos they had created and I had organized it. I had taken the theft and I had converted it into capital. I had taken the betrayal and I had used it as fuel. There were moments, late at night, when I sat in the office and the building was quiet, when I thought about what it cost me. It cost me the relationship with my sister. It cost me the memory of my father. It cost me the illusion that family is a sanctuary, but I gained something else. I gained respect. I gained authority. I gained the knowledge that I could stand alone. I gained the knowledge that I did not need their approval to be valid. I was valid because I was here. I was valid because I did the work. I was valid because I told the truth. 1 year after the settlement, I received a letter from Alina. It was handwritten. It was short. She said she hoped I was well. She said she missed the holidays. She said she understood why I did what I did. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just acknowledged the reality. I read the letter. I put it in the file. I didn't write back. There was nothing to say. The conversation was over. The account was closed. We were strangers who shared blood. That was all. And that was enough. I walk through the warehouse now and I see the changes. I see the new trucks. I see the smiles on the faces of the drivers. I see the efficiency of the loading docks. I see a business that is alive. I see a legacy that is honest. I stand in the office and I look out the window. The rain is falling again. It hits the glass. It runs down. It clears the view. I can see the highway. I can see the traffic moving. I can see the world turning. I am 43 years old now. I have lines on my face. I have gray in my hair. I have scars that no one can see. But I have my hands, and they are clean. I did not get the support. I got the business, and the business is enough. It has to be, because it is mine. I built it, I saved it, I own it, and no one can take it away. Not anymore. The story of what happened is not a story of victory. It is a story of survival. It is a story of what happens when you refuse to be a victim. It is a story of what happens when you choose logic over emotion, evidence over accusation, and action over complaint. People talk about revenge as if it is fire, as if it is burning everything down. But real revenge is not fire. Real revenge is ice. It is cold. It is hard. It is permanent. It is the structure that remains when the fire has gone out. I am the structure. I am the ice. I am the one who is still standing. Sometimes I think about the day in the conference room. I think about the look on Sterling's face. I think about the sound of the rain. I think about the feeling of the folder in my hands. It was heavy. It felt like a weight. But now, when I hold the files, they feel light. They feel like tools. They feel like instruments of creation. I have learned that power is not given. It is taken. It is taken through diligence. It is taken through patience. It is taken through the willingness to do the hard things that others are too afraid to do. Alina was afraid. She was afraid of the work. She was afraid of the truth. She wanted the comfort. She wanted the safety. I chose the risk. I chose the truth. And I won. I do not celebrate. I do not toast. I do not brag. I simply work. I come in early. I leave late. I review the numbers. I check the logs. I ensure that everything is correct. Because I know how easy it is for things to go wrong. I know how easy it is for someone to take what is yours. I know that vigilance is the price of ownership. I pay the price willingly. I pay it every day. And I will continue to pay it, because this is my life. This is my company. This is my justice. There are people who say I should have forgiven them. They say that holding onto anger is poison. They say that family is forever. I say that family is a choice. And they chose themselves. They chose greed. They chose deception. I chose integrity. I chose justice. I chose myself. And I sleep well at night. I sleep the sleep of the righteous. I sleep the sleep of the victor. Not because I destroyed them, but because I saved myself. I saved the business. I saved the employees. I saved the legacy. That is what matters. That is what counts. The sun is coming up now. The light is hitting the desk. It is bright. It is clear. It illuminates the dust motes dancing in the air. It illuminates the papers on my desk. It illuminates the phone. It is quiet. The phone is not ringing. There are no crises. There are no emergencies. There is only the work. And I am ready. I am always ready. I pick up the pen. I open the file. I begin the day. I am Zara. And this is my company. And I am never letting go. The narrative of my life has changed. It is no longer about what was taken from me. It is about what I have built. It is about the future. It is about the next shipment, the next contract, the next hire. It is about growth. It is about expansion. It is about leaving something behind that is solid, something that cannot be shaken. Something that is true. I look at the reflection in the window. I see a woman who is tired but strong. I see a woman who knows her worth. I see a woman who is not afraid. I smile. It is a small smile. It is a private smile, but it is real. It is the smile of someone who knows the truth, and the truth is enough. I think about the legal fees. I think about the hours I spent with Sarah. I think about the nights I spent reading contracts. I think about the stress. I think about the cost. But I also think about the result. I think about the bank account. I think about the equity. I think about the control. I have control. I have full control. No one can override me. No one can undermine me. No one can steal from me. Not again. I have put systems in place. I have put checks in place. I have put people in place who are loyal to the work, not to the family. I have created a culture of accountability. I have created a culture of transparency. I have created a culture where theft is impossible. Because I am watching, because I know, because I care. Elena calls sometimes, on birthdays, on holidays. She leaves voicemails. She says she hopes I'm happy. She says she thinks of me. I listen to the voicemails. I delete them. I do not save them. I do not need the reminder. I do not need the guilt. I have moved on. I have moved forward. I have left the past in the past. The past is a lesson. It is not a home. I do not live there. I live here, in the present, in the office, in the reality, and the reality is good. The reality is mine. I walk out of the office. I walk onto the floor. The workers nod. They respect me. They know I fight for them. They know I protect their jobs. They know I pay the bills on time. They know I am fair. That is all the validation I need. That is all the approval I need. The approval of the people who depend on me. The approval of the people who work with me. The approval of the mirror. That is the only court that matters. The court of public opinion is fickle. The court of family is biased. The court of conscience is absolute, and my conscience is clear. I get into my car, I drive home, the city passes by, the lights blur. The traffic flows, I am part of the flow, I am part of the system, I am part of the machine, but I am the operator. I am the one who steers. I am the one who decides the direction. I am the one who sets the pace. And I am setting a fast pace. I am setting a high standard. I am setting an example for myself, for my employees, for anyone who thinks they can be pushed around. I am the example. I am the proof. I am the evidence. When I get home, I make dinner. I cook for one. I eat at the table. I listen to the silence. It is a comfortable silence. It is not lonely. It is peaceful. It is the peace of someone who has fought the war and won. It is the peace of someone who has nothing to hide. I wash the dishes. I dry them. I put them away. I go to bed. I sleep. I dream of nothing. I wake up. I do it again. This is my life. This is my revenge. This is my victory, and it is quiet. It is calm. It is controlled just like me. The business continues to grow. We acquired a competitor last month. A smaller firm. They were struggling. They had debt. They had mismanagement. They reminded me of Vance 2 years ago. I bought them. I fixed them. I integrated them. I made them profitable. I did not fire everyone. I retrained them. I gave them a chance. Because I know what it is like to be given a failing business. I know what it is like to be told you are not enough. I know what it is like to have to prove everyone wrong. So I give others the chance to prove themselves. But I watch them. I watch the numbers. I watch the logs. I watch the money. Trust is good. Verification is better. I verify everything. Marcus tried to start a consulting firm. It failed. He didn't have the substance. He didn't have the work ethic. He only had the schemes. Schemes don't work without a foundation. They collapse. They always collapse. I heard he is working for a friend now. A lower position. Less pay. Less status. He is learning what it is like to be an employee. He is learning what it is like to take orders. It is a good lesson for him. Maybe he will learn, maybe he won't. It doesn't matter to me. His life is his own. My life is mine. We are on different paths. His is going down. Mine is going up. That is the natural order of things. That is justice. I sit in my office now. The sun is high. The phone rings. It is a client. A new client. They want to contract with us. They want a long-term partnership. They want reliability. They want integrity. They want Vance logistics. I tell them we can do it. I tell them we are the best. I tell them the truth, because I can. Because I am. I hang up. I look at the window. I see the sky. It is blue. It is clear. It is open. There are no clouds. There is no rain. There is only the light. And I am standing in it. I am Zara. And I am done. The story is over. The script is written. The pages are turned. There is nothing left to say. There is nothing left to prove. There is only the work, and I will do the work until the end, until the last truck stops, until the last box is delivered, until the last bill is paid. I will be here. I will be ready. I will be strong. I will be cold. I will be controlled. I will be me, and that is enough. That is everything. That is all. I close the file. I stand up. I turn off the light. I lock the door. I walk down the hall. The lights flicker off behind me, one by one. The building goes dark, but I am not afraid of the dark. I know the way. I know the exit. I know the car. I know the road. I know the home. I know the future. I know myself. And that is the only knowledge that matters. The rest is noise. The rest is distraction. The rest is irrelevant. I step out into the night. The air is cool. The stars are out. The world is quiet, and I am alive. I am free. I am whole. This is the end of the beginning. This is the start of the rest. This is the life I chose. This is the life I earned. This is the life I keep. No one can take it. No one can touch it. No one can change it. It is mine. It is secure. It is safe. It is solid. It is real, and I am here. I am Zara. And I am watching, always ready, always prepared, always in control. The end.